Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we are finally bringing you part 4 of our Game of Thrones instructional series. Part 3 was released November 8th, 2022. To give you an idea, I felt like maybe it was roughly a year ago, slightly over a year ago that I released part 3. So, my bad. I guess you could call me an oath breaker. I don't know. I don't know why part 4 fell off the side for so long. But here we go. We're getting it now. So today we are going to cover all of the additional rules in the rulebook that we haven't covered so far. That literally falls under a section called Other Rules. Basically, pages 22 to, let's see. So without anything else, let's get into part 4 of how to play a Game of Thrones, the board game, 2nd edition. In addition to the 10 normal order tokens, each house has access to 5 special order tokens. These may be played instead of some of the 10 normal order tokens, but the number of special order tokens that may be used is based on your placement on the King's Court. So if you are in place 1 or 2, you can use 3 special orders, place 3, 2, place 4, 1. And of course, this can change if you're having to use this because of lower player counts and all of that. The Support +1 special order token simply means that the supporting combat strength from the area it's played in is +1. The Consolidate Power special order token can be used as a normal Consolidate Power order, or it can be used to initiate mustering in its area following the rules for mustering as usual. Very important to realize, though, only the area given this token will be mustering. And this doesn't override the need for a castle or stronghold. If you play this in an area with no castle or stronghold, then no mustering can occur. March +1 special order gives +1 combat strength to the attacker when combat is initiated with this. The Raid special order token can be used as a normal raid order, or it can be instead resolved to remove any one adjacent defense order. Defense +2 gives the defending player in this area +2 combat strength. Now let's discuss Wildling attacks. In a Game of Thrones, the board game, there are 2 events during the Westeros phase which cause the Wildlings to attack. The first instance is if this Wildlings track reaches 12. The second is if a Wildlings attack Westeros card is drawn and resolved. In all 3 Westeros decks, 1, 2, and 3, some cards are marked with a Wildling icon, such as a Throne of Blades. As you can see, there's the Wildling icon there. For each Westeros card with this icon, this threat token is advanced 1 space. This means that it is possible for the Wildling threat track to advance a total of 3 times in a single Westeros phase. When a Wildling attack is resolved, whether it's resolved because the token reached 12 or because a Wildling attack card is drawn, you will resolve the attack following 6 steps. Determine Wildling strength, bid power, calculate Night's Watch strength, determine outcome, adjust Wildling track, and discard power. To determine the Wildling strength, you'll check the current position of the Wildling threat token, in this case 12, and that is the strength of the Wildling attack. Each player then hides all their available power behind their player screen and secretly bids a number of power tokens in a closed fist. Once all players have made their secret bid, bids are simultaneously revealed. Add together the total power bid by all players to determine the strength of the Night's Watch. If the strength of the Night's Watch equals or exceeds the Wildling strength, the Wildling attack has been defeated. However, if the Wildling strength exceeds the Night's Watch, the Wildlings are victorious. Let's go back and say that the Night's Watch was victorious. You will immediately reset the Wildling threat token to 0. This is step 5, adjust the Wildling track. However, if the Wildlings were victorious, you will only move it back 2 steps. It should be noted that it's a minimum of 0, so if the Wildlings attacked with strength 2, it would just move to 0. After the outcome of the Wildling attack has been determined, victorious or not, players will face ramifications of success or failure. Players will reveal a Wildling card and then resolve it. If the Night's Watch successfully defeated the Wildlings, the player who bid the highest amount of power receives the reward here. In this case, the highest bidder may retrieve one house card of their choice from their house card discard pile. If the Wildlings are victorious, the player who bid the least amount of power first suffers the severe penalty listed here. In this case, the lowest bidder destroys 3 of their units anywhere. Then all other players suffer the lesser penalty, where it says everyone else destroys 2 of their units anywhere. Then the Wildling card is placed face down at the bottom of the Wildling deck. The Wildling attack is now over and the game proceeds as normal. It should also be noted that in a situation like this, where the Wildlings hit 12 because of this card, and then also the Wildlings attack card is drawn, that means the Wildlings are going to attack twice. Ship transport is one of the most important aspects of a Game of Thrones, the board game. This allows knights, footmen, and siege engines to take advantage of seas to travel much faster than they would be able to on foot. Essentially, any 2 land areas that are connected by ships are considered adjacent for the purposes of marching and retreating. To achieve this, each sea area must have a friendly ship in it and must be consecutive, one right next to the other. You could think of this as sort of a bridge, which would allow the player, in this case, to move from Highgarden all the way over to Salt Shore or even Sunspear. Also, I set it up this way because I wanted to point something out, because this nailed me in a game one time and I took a pretty heavy loss. Red Wine Straits is not required for Highgarden to make it over here. Keep in mind that this area here, the West Summer Sea, is all connected as well. This is one entire section. So, since the West Summer Sea is connected to Highgarden here, you only need these 2 for someone from Highgarden to make it all the way to Sunspear, or even Storm's End. There is no limit to the number of times a player can use ships in this way. However, ships of an opposing house can never be used to transport another player. So the Lannisters here cannot use the Stark ships to move, even if somehow the Starks and Lannisters were aligned. It should be noted that any order tokens assigned to the sea area of the ships has no effect on the ship's ability to transport units. A ship may even transport units if it has been routed. Ships cannot move using ship transport, so this ship from the Red Wine Straits could not then use these ships to end up here in Shipbreaker Bay. It's important that when we say that the land areas are considered adjacent, Highgarden to Sunspear, etc., again, as I said earlier, it is only for marching and retreating, not for any other purpose. Now let's talk a little bit more about control. A house is said to control a land area when it has at least 1 footman, knight, or siege engine in the area, or has previously established control in that area by placing a power token there. So in this case, the Starks have control of the Dornish Marches, the Reach, the Kingswood, and the Boneway. What the Starks are doing down here, I don't know. If a player decides to vacate an area that they have control of, they stand to lose the benefits of that area unless they establish control. They may establish control by placing a power token in that area. It's important to note this can only be done with land areas. A player may never establish control over a sea area. If a friendly unit later moves back into the area, the power token remains there. This means that if they then move out of the area again, they still have control. If a player vacates a land area in order to initiate combat in another area, prior to initiating combat, they have to decide whether or not they're going to establish control. The outcome of the combat can't have anything to do with whether or not control was established. A power token on the game board is returned to the power pool only after an opponent marches into the area. This does not result in combat. The power token is simply discarded back to the pool. Power tokens do not aid the defender in combat in any way, and they do not count as power icons printed on the game board. There can only be a single power token per area. And if a player runs out of power tokens, then that means they are unable to establish control when they leave an area. It's also important to realize that the only time a player can establish control is when they vacate an area via the march order. If an area is vacated for any other reason, such as a negative effect from a Wildling card, that is not a reason that a player could establish control. Each house has a home area marked by its shield. You can see here, this is the Tyrell home area, and this is the Martell home area. From the beginning of the game, a house is considered to have established control of its own home area, meaning the printed shield functions the same as a power token, and it cannot be removed. Players are able to control another player's home area by keeping their own friendly units in that area, or by establishing control over that home area. When you establish control over another player's home area, make sure to place your power token directly over the shield to prevent any confusion. If, when a player vacates another player's home area, they choose not to establish control or cannot establish control, then that area immediately reverts back to its original owner. Now, players are free to make alliances and free to break alliances at any time. Any alliance can be broken for any reason whatsoever. Nothing is ever binding. There are 3 strict rules, however, governing what conspiring players are allowed to do. Players may never show any other player in public or secret any assigned order token, nor may a player show their unassigned order token, since that would allow another player to figure out what assigned order tokens are on the board. This is, of course, referring to the planning phase. When there are no assigned order tokens on the board, you can show other players your unassigned ones because everybody has the same unassigned ones. So do what you want there. A player may also never give, donate, or bribe any game item, such as power tokens, order tokens, house cards, or dominance token. And bids must always be made in complete secret. A player may not show any opponent their bid before revealing it. A port functions as a special area between the land and sea area they connect. Only the player controlling the land area connected may use the port. That player would be considered the port's owner. The port itself may only be occupied by a ship unit. Multiple ship units occupying a port are considered an army and must be taken into account when considering your supply limits. In addition to normal army limits, the port may only have a maximum of 3 ships. If the land area connected to the port musters units, a ship may be mustered directly in the port or in the associated sea area. A player may muster ships in a port even if the adjacent sea area has enemy ships in it. This is, in fact, the most powerful feature of ports. Just as with units in normal areas, ships in a port area must receive an order token during the assign order step. Players may play defense tokens here, even though they will have no effect since a port cannot be directly attacked. Ship units may march from a port into a sea area or from a sea area into a friendly port. However, as we mentioned a moment ago, a ship may never march into a port that is occupied or controlled by another player. Ships in a port may support combat in an adjacent sea area, but not an adjacent land area. And as you might expect, ships in a port provide no defensive strength to combat in the adjacent land area. Also, as you probably expect, ships in a port can raid the adjacent sea area, but not the adjacent land area. Ships in an adjacent sea area can raid an adjacent port. If during the Resolve Consolidate Power Orders step of the action phase there are any enemy ships in an adjacent sea area connected to a port, the Consolidate Power Order assigned to the port is removed without effect. Otherwise, it is resolved as normal. The special Consolidate Power Order cannot be used to muster if it's placed on a port, but it still can be used as a normal Consolidate Power Order. If an enemy successfully takes control of the port by taking control of the land area connected to it, they immediately replace any ships in the port with an equal number of their own. If the player does not have enough ships to replace them all, the excess ships are simply removed from the board. Neutral force tokens represent the resistance of independent houses unwilling to submit to the machinations of the players. These are placed during the setup of the board. In a 6-player game, the only two will be the Erie and King's Landing. Players may march into an area with a neutral force token in an effort to destroy that neutral force and take control of the area. However, this can only be attempted if the player has sufficient combat strength to defeat the neutral force token. This means that the marching player must equal or exceed the strength value printed here of 6, or in the case of King's Landing, 5. So, a single footman game piece would not be enough to take the Erie. House cards are not used when defeating a neutral force token, but march order bonuses or penalties do count. Neutral forces cannot receive support from neighboring areas, but the attacking player can receive support. Additionally, the Valyrian Steel Blade cannot be used to receive the +1 bonus. When the marching player's combat strength equals or exceeds a neutral force token, the token is removed from the board, and the marching player moves their units into the area as normal. This counts as the march order's one allowed attack. Most of the neutral force tokens used in a 3-player game are marked with this symbol here. This represents an insurmountable area which cannot be entered. This essentially means that this area is off limits to all players for the entirety of the game. Each house has a garrison. In the case of the Lannisters, it's Lannisport. A garrison is not a unit, which means it cannot be assigned an order, but also it means it does not count toward the supply limits. These garrisons provide extra defense for the home area of the house. So if the house's home area is attacked, the garrison's listed strength will be added to the defense. If there are no units defending a location, the garrison token still will engage in combat as normal, as if the garrison were a single unit. It's easy to confuse garrisons with neutral force tokens since they look so similar, but remember, these are considered a single unit if they are defending their home area by themselves. And so house cards and all the normal combat rules will apply. If a garrison is defeated in combat, it is permanently removed from the game. This happens if it's defending by itself or if it is defending with the help of other units. The number of sword or fortification icons on house cards does not affect the garrison being removed. Players may not assign an order to an area containing only a garrison. Garrison cannot be used for supporting adjacent areas. Its strength is only used when it is attacked. Garrisons are immune to the effect of skull icons on the Tides of Battle cards if you're using those. Now let's briefly discuss some game board features. The game board mainly consists of sea and land areas, of course. However, there are rivers in a few locations. These boundaries prevent movement between the land areas they divide. In other words, a unit cannot move from the Mountains of the Moon to River Run, since the river blocks that movement. For all game purposes, you would consider these two areas not adjacent. This means that marching, raiding, supporting, none of this can occur. Bridges are the exception to the rule for rivers, and so this bridge here would allow you to move from the Mountains of the Moon into Crackclaw Point. These two areas are considered adjacent. And there are 3 island areas: Dragonstone, the Arbor, and Pike. These are still considered a land area. Because they're islands, in order for a footman, knight, or siege engine to get off of the island, they'll have to use ship transport to make it to the mainland. Any other island you see on the game board, such as this island here down in Shipbreaker Bay, are just for aesthetics the only islands that can actually be used as I said, are Dragonstone, the Arbor, and Pike, and they're surrounded by this white border to indicate that they are actually a play area. There are a few cards, such as Doran Martell's House card, that allows the influence track to be forced to move outside of the normal Clash of Kings Westeros card. When a card such as this is played and a house's influence token is moved to, for instance, the bottom of the track, all other houses will move accordingly to make room for that house in its new position. If such a move would cause a player to lose the number 1 spot on a track, as we just saw happen to the Tyrells, it would immediately give the corresponding dominance token to the new house in the 1 position. If this sort of shift occurs at the King's Court track, you would still exchange the dominance token just as you would in the other track. However, if special orders are already out on the board, those are not affected. It would simply affect the number of special orders you'd be able to put out on the next round. And finally, let's discuss hidden information. Each player is given a shield, which has their family crest on the front and on the back some references for the order tokens, as well as starting information for the house. From the start of the game, players should always keep their unused order tokens behind their screens. However, a player's power should always be visible, except immediately prior to bidding. When bidding is about to begin, players should first announce the amount of power they have available to themselves, then place it behind the screen, and then take the amount they plan to bid into their fist. Once bidding is complete, all the remaining power the player has is once again placed in a visible area. The contents of a player's house cards, including their discard pile, is always open information except during Step 3 of combat. And that's how you play a Game of Thrones the board game, Part 4. This now concludes our entire Game of Thrones series. I am terribly sorry it took so long to get Part 4 out. I do want to point out that in the back of the book, on pages 28 and 29, are a few other rules that I have not covered. Tides of Battle is an optional set of cards that adds a little bit more uncertainty to a battle. Instead of it being completely deterministic, there is a card draw that can change the outcome of the battle. If you want to use that, which I recommend, take a look at page 29. Page 28 is not really extra rules, it's just clarifying a 5-player, 4-player, and 3-player game setup. Thank you again for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you like our content. We've got lots of other great stuff coming out. We've got our continued series on how to play the Gambler's Chest expansion for Kingdom of Death Monster. We've got the final part of SAS Rogue Regiment coming up soon. And we're going to begin our Creel Manor how to play video soon as well, which will either be a 1 or 2-part video. I'm not sure yet. I got to take a closer look at how the rule book is split up there and figure out what I'm going to do with that. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.